is going on, everybody?
Hello, hello. How's everybody doing today?
Look at us matching that in our blue today.
Well,
So cool. We've got some pretty interesting stuff for you guys today. We're going to be talking AWS for a little bit. What we're going to show you is not crazy complex or anything like that, but we found in the past few months through several engagements and testing and things like that, it's extremely effective from a threat perspective and trying to help people build and determine detection capabilities. But just in a general process or stance, it's been really effective for us. So we think it'll be interesting to show you guys. You might get something out of it. And this is something I believe we plan on publishing here soon as like a little combo threat for you guys to utilize. So with that in mind, Tyler, let's show them what we're working with.
yeah, for sure. I do want to preface this and say that this threat is designed to work if you are able to, to gain access to a victim host or a machine that already has AWS CLI installed and running on it. So this threat is kind of predicated on having a session already established with their AWS instance. So something we would expect to see on like a developer machine or an AWS administrator or something like that. Someone that should probably have pretty high administrative rights if they're using something. If they're utilizing the CLI, I think it's probably pretty safe to assume that they are an advanced user or they would have advanced permissions on it. But yeah, that's an important piece of the thread, kind of to make sure that that is in place before you go ahead and run it.
So I guess that's a good point there. So a little bit of a backstory. On a previous engagement we ran, the endpoint that was provided for use in the PTE was actually an active developer's endpoint. So it was signed into all their normal tooling. It had files and services, all kinds of the things you would expect from a developer. We happened to land on that endpoint, saw there's a profile already there, and we were able to piece together some of these steps based on what we found from that engagement by seeing their profile, the permissions they had, and being able to do this enumeration piece. So that's kind of where this is all coming from, you guys.
Yeah, for sure. So I think first we'll just get into the AWS enumeration piece, more of talking about what this campaign is doing, and then we'll show the results afterwards. So first up, we have set as a variable up here at the top of what your profile name is. Most often it will be set to default by default. But if you know what the profile name is, you can set it up here at the top, and then that way it'll use it through the rest of the steps. You can also dynamically pull this, but if people are logged into multiple tenants or something like that, you could have multiple results. So we thought it was easier in this example just to go ahead and just list it out statically. So the first thing that we do is we run this AWS S3 ls command. So what that'll do is list out all of the S3 buckets that the account has access to. And then this -- profile one is again just pulling the profile name and appending it to the end. And then next up, it will go in and run this get caller identities. This will give you a little more information about the user that you're logged in as and what permissions they have, what you're accessing, things like that. These next two I think are really interesting. So not even running any AWS commands, but inside of the user profile, there's a .aws, so a hidden directory that has a config and a credentials file in it. And these are really neat because it has in plain text what your configurations are or what your credentials are for logging into AWS via AWS CLI.
Yeah, this one kind of threw us for a loop.
Yeah, I could not believe that it was just written in plain text. Like if you have access to it, you could just read it and harvest these credentials, which we'll show here in a minute. But in the config file, that's if you're utilizing some kind of third party or some kind of SSO login, it'll have the config file in there. So it might not be as useful for an adversary, but this credentials file, if you're logging in with just a typical account, it'll have your secret key and your access token in there. Which again, you can just grab and harvest and throw it into your own credentials file and then log in as that user. We have the get caller identity in there again. I must have duplicated it on accident. And then we go into the list users. So this will show you what all users your account is able to see inside of that instance. and then we look for some databases. So this will just pull back information on any databases that the user has access to. Again, the list users, and then the last one will pull any secrets that are stored on your AWS instance that your account has access to. This again will output just in plain text. So if you have secrets on there and you have a user account that is logged in to AWS CLI and can run this command, it will output your secrets, again, in plain text, which is just wild to me. But so that's what the thread is going to do. So now let's go into it and actually see how it looks, right? So expanding it out. So this is just us loading the modules. So the first one we see, we run that ls command on the S3 buckets, and we see that we have access to this cryptid society S3 bucket. So we're going to make a note of that. We'll utilize this tidbit in the future actions in the next campaign. So we have the cryptid society S3 bucket. You could go a step further and even enumerate the contents of the S3 bucket, but we don't do that for this thread. And then next up, we just run that caller identity, like I'm saying, so we could see my user ID, what I'm logged in as, what account it's under, that it's an assumed role, things like that. So just some more context about what this user, who this user is and what they have access to. And then next up, we have where it pulls the config file, but I deleted that because I don't want you guys to see it. So, but I do have inside of this credentials file, just some dummy creds that we created inside of it. And as you can see, like if you have access to it and you can pull this key ID and this access key, you can just create your own credentials file and log in as this user. Like you can use these creds. This is exactly how they look on your real box. If you have AWS CLI installed on your machine, I would not recommend, but I think it would be an interesting exercise for you to go into your AWS folder or directory and see what's in there. And then next up, this again is just running that identity. Next up here, we're listing out all of the users that our account has access to or is able to view. So we see up here that we have this Exfil account, which is our dummy account that we've created, but we'll make note of this Exfil account also, this Exfil username, and see if we can utilize that with some follow-on actions in the next campaign. So we know that cryptid society, and we know this Exfil user that we're going to try to take advantage of. And then we list out any database instances that we have. We don't have any in our instance, but if we did, it would populate inside of these brackets. And then again, the users, and then the secrets. Again, I did not think that it was a great idea to show some of the secrets that were assigned to this AWS account. But again, it's all in plain text. So if you did run that secrets enumeration command that I was showing, and maybe we'll throw it in the chat too, so you guys can see it. You would be able to see the secrets, the name of what it's associated with, the secret in plain text, and you could pull like the descriptions or anything like that. Maybe there's a URL in there or a host name or something like that that you could take advantage of. So with that, the two pieces that we're really going to focus on with these now follow-on actions is we're going to try to harvest the contents of that S3 bucket, that cryptid society S3 bucket that we had up there, and we're going to attempt to create a backdoor account, a second set of keys for that Exfil user account. So that is pretty simple with AWS, and it's so like well documented that it really is very simple to find some of these commands in these follow-on commands. So the first one up, we're going to create another access key. So that secondary set of keys, those backdoor set of keys for this Exfil account, which is just running IAM create access key. You give it the user and you give it that profile at the end, and you can see here that it goes in and creates the access key ID, which is kind of like your username, and that secret access key, which is your password. This account has been disabled now, but if you go ahead and look on your in your IAM instance or part of your AWS account, you would see two different keys in there. The one set of legitimate keys that this user has to log in and run, and then the secondary set of keys that we just created. So if you're not monitoring for new key creation or duplicative key creation for a user account, this is a great way to establish some kind of persistence. And then again, you could take these access keys and secret access keys, throw it in your credentials file inside of your .aws directory, and then authenticate as this user. And then the next one up here, let me scroll way up, is we're going to sync or copy down all of the contents of that S3 bucket down to our local endpoint. So in that, you can run S3 sync or S3 copy. Sync should continually download things as they are uploaded to this S3 bucket. So if you want like a persistent dynamically updating download, I guess you could say, I would recommend that you use sync. If you're just going to do a one on the way down, you could run a copy. But in here, you can see that we're pulling down some sensitive data. That sounds pretty good.
Very
Sensitive, got some U.S. employees IP. Maybe that's intellectual property. Maybe it's IP addresses. We could look after we download the files. This looks like some kind of backup config, maybe a router config or something. UK employees IP. Some text, some Scythe ASCII text that we have up there, and then some UK customers CSV. So everything inside of, we were lucky inside of this Cryptid Society S3 bucket, they have a sensitive data directory in there. So lucky us, we're able to download these files or exfil these files down to us. So that's one way that you could go in and download the contents or exfil the contents of the S3 bucket. You just pull it down locally. And then we have up here, we run the uploader module, which then we would just upload each of those documents, or we would zip that directory and then upload those documents to Scythe. So that's one way that you could utilize this to do S3 enumeration and exfil. And the next way that we have here is to sync not to our local endpoint or our local box, but to sync to another S3 bucket that we have stood up. So here we have, again, just running the sync command. So it should continually update as things are uploaded to the Cryptid Society S3 bucket, but it will sync from the Cryptid Society over to our Scythe staging S3 bucket, which we created as a public S3 bucket that we would be able to upload contents from essentially anywhere that could reach our AWS instance. And then in there, you can see the same thing, that we're just copying over those same files, so those sensitive data, UK employees, US employees, that router config, etc. Just copying that over from the Cryptid Society S3 bucket over to our Scythe staging S3 bucket, just as another form of exfiltration.
And now keep in mind these. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say, and then the proof, it's right here, that Scythe staging, sensitive data, and then all of that information is right there, just like we said it would be.
Super fancy. And now keep in mind these two little quick setups, they're not the end all be all for AWS enumeration or anything like that. These are just the ones that we found that have been very consistent for us and the most helpful. We can also, if you wanted to, if you're a Scythe customer, you can pair these with a threat we published back last summer that does it creates an AWS IAM backdoor. And that one, there's further enumeration steps like looking at DNS, enumerating the actual S3 instances you have, anything like that. It creates a new user, gives them some permissions, and then sets a secondary access key. There's a bunch of other stuff that happens in that one as well. So these are all they complement each other, I guess you could say, as you're going through them. And we're trying to put out more and more content like that you can build and compound off of. Yeah,
for sure. So we have we have another AWS threat that I think we'll probably go over, maybe not next Threat Thursday, but one soon, that utilizes an rclone configuration to we essentially look for a bunch of sensitive files. We zip all those files up, and then utilizing this rclone, this renamed rclone and rclone configuration, exfil it out to a separate S3 bucket. So another way to utilize AWS and S3 buckets as a means of exfiltration.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look at that. We kept on a pretty good time today. Nothing crazy with this one.
No, pretty straightforward. I mean, just enumeration, and then using that information that you have from the enumeration piece, seeing what your user has, documenting the things that are of interest to you, and then just deploying those in the actions to perform whatever actions on objective you're trying to accomplish.
Well, with that in mind, I think that's about it. Parting words. If you guys are interested in anything else that we're doing or building, maybe you want to attend one of the workshops, things like that, be sure to go check out the Scythe website and register. We've got a bunch of new workshops coming up. Some where we're doing, say, emulating specific threat actors. Some where we're talking about threat emulation as a whole, purple teaming, hunting through the seam is coming up here soon. So we've got a lot going on. We also have in April, I'll get ahead of this a bit. Unicon is happening again. If you attended last year, it was awesome. And we're doing it again. There's a great lineup of speakers. You guys will start hearing more about that soon. I just figured I'd tease it a little bit first. With that, Tyler, I think we are good for the day. I don't see any comments or questions or anything.
Yeah, I think so as well. Thanks everyone for hopping on, and hope to see you on the next one.
Till next time.